My name is Aesha Duval, and this is my Hugo story. I was 10 years old when Hurricane Hugo hit St. Croix, and I weathered the storm with my family, my parents, and my three of my brothers, and my youngest sister, who is 3 years old at the time. Also, we had a family friend, their son, who spent that weekend with us. He was my age. And I don't remember the sense of urgency that we experience today when we're about to go through a storm, rushing to the grocery store, buying supplies, stocking up on batteries. But I think what happened was just a week before, we were told or informed that a storm was coming, but at the last minute, the forecast, the path of the storm shifted and we were spared. And I think forecasters somehow, for some reason, led us to believe that this would happen again, or it could have been human nature, but irregardless, they were terribly wrong. It was a Sunday morning. It started off like any other Sunday morning, except I don't think we went to church that morning. My father went to work as usual. He worked at an oil refinery, and pretty much by mid-morning, the weather changed. The sky, which normally is blue, white clouds, just turned black or gray and completely scary, gloomy. And the wind started to pick up. My father came home. He said basically they shut down the refinery because the storm was coming, which was highly unusual for an oil refinery. And I started to see my parents started to make preparations, boarding up not necessarily the windows, but honestly, I don't remember what they were doing, but they were starting to do certain things, maybe anything that was loose that could be blown away, securing it. But at that time, no one in our generation had experienced a storm like this, and not even my parents or grandparents. So this was something new to all of us, and we really didn't know what to expect. By about 1:55 p.m., I remember the time, the power went out, and the winds was really something remarkable to behold. I remember looking out the window, watching my neighbor's house, the galvanized on the roof tearing off piece by piece, like opening a can of tuna, until my mother scolded me and told me to get away from the window. And the power was coming in and out. The winds were just unbelievable. And I remember my mom talking to one of my brothers over the phone. He was in college in North Carolina. And her last words to him were, "We're dying, we're dying." And the phone cut off. I can't even imagine what was going through his head. But it started to get worse. Steadily, very slowly, the wind started picking up. And my mother basically banished the youngest ones to our rooms, try to go to sleep. So by the time the sun went down, I woke up and I went outside and I saw my brothers mopping the floor in vain, trying to get water out. I mean, water was coming from everywhere. It was coming from the windows, it was coming from the cistern, it was coming from the door. Water was everywhere, and it was just impossible to continue mopping because it kept coming. And I remember my brother looking up at the clock. At that point, it felt like it should be midnight, but it was really just 8:30 at night. Time just stopped, and it was just agony. Once again, my mother banished me to my room, and I think I might have fallen asleep, maybe dozed off, until there was a loud crash. And I was afraid to look out my window, but I knew what it was. My dad had a tool shed right outside my bedroom window, and it was just getting ripped apart. And I went outside again to tell my parents, the shed is getting ripped apart. But out there, everyone was busy moving stuff out of the living room. My mom was getting the photo albums and taking down pictures off the wall, so I started to help. And once again, I was banished to my room after that was done. Then at some point in the night, somebody came and got me. We all were ushered into my parents' bedroom, which was on the farthest western side of the house. The storm was coming from the east, and we were told to sit in the closet, all of us younger kids, and we were told to pray. And we started reciting prayers that I didn't even know I knew. But that's what we did. Started praying. The wind was just deafening, and my ears started to pop, and I started to get this really sick feeling in my stomach, like cramping in my stomach, and I just felt nauseous at the same time. It was unbelievable, and it was hot, and you couldn't breathe. My parents, they took a dresser of drawers and braced it against the door because the wind was coming. It's opening the door, and it just continued on like that, hour after hour. And just when we thought it can't get any worse, it got worse. Wood breaking, metal creaking, glass breaking, waters flowing through the hallway. We could hear my mother's pots clanging against the hallway walls, just floating down. It was unbelievable. It's just, our senses were just overloaded with just noise, and this wind kept rising like a crescendo, louder and louder and howling and screeching. It's almost indescribable. That's just the best way I can describe it. And then it stopped. And I remember hearing someone saying, "Is it over?" And my dad had a little radio, and the announcer, who was still broadcasting miraculously, telling the listeners, "It's not over. The eye of the storm is passing over St. Croix right now. And to be careful, because it could last a couple minutes, it could last an hour. Nobody can really know for sure." So right then we heard knocking on our window, and it was our next door neighbor, 14-year-old son, who was the same age as one of my brothers. He was screaming for help because their house was completely destroyed. They lived in a wooden house, and they needed help. So my brother moved the dresser drawer from the door and ran out. My mother screamed for him to come back. My dad ran after him. And the reason why he ran out is because my neighbor, he said that they were coming to the front of the house. But we knew from all the glass breaking that just was not a good idea. So they managed to get everyone in the room, and everyone's feet were cut with glass, including my brother's. And I remember sitting there watching my mother pick bits of glass out of his feet. And my dad came in. He basically took a look outside and said the entire front of the house was destroyed. The roof was gone. All that was left was the roof covering the bedrooms, including the one that we were in. And there was water everywhere, debris everywhere. So just like that, the wind started picking up again. And when we thought it was really bad before, it was 150 times worse. Completely deafening. Now we had about 6 more people in the house with us, in the room with us, so it was even more hot. We couldn't breathe. Our parents couldn't keep us in the closet anymore. We were complaining too much. It was too hot. So they told us to lay on the bed, and everyone else sat on the floor. And then the wind, again, completely deafening. Then all of a sudden we start hearing a creaking noise above us. Everyone looks up, and the paint on the ceiling started chipping away and started falling on our faces like snowflakes. And we realized the roof is lifting. So I think at that point, and I know for me, I thought, we're going to die. So my mother covered us with pillows and sheets and told us to try to sleep, which again was near impossible. My ears were popping. I'm sick to my stomach. I can't breathe. But I guess out of sheer exhaustion, I did fall asleep. And the winds eventually did die down. Then came heavy downpour, torrential rain, lots of thunder. And I remember somebody saying, well, hopefully that's a sign that it's over. And slowly the wind started to diminish and diminish. And someone peeked out the window, and it wasn't quite day, but there was a little bit of light. And I remember peeking out, and I saw nothing. Everything was flat and gray and just empty. Many hours later, I eventually went outside. I think it was probably Monday afternoon by that time. And what I saw has stuck with me to this day. It There was nothing. There was no green anymore. I mean, I live on a lush island. Everything is green, palm trees. Nothing was green. Everything was brown. It looked like someone had taken torches and set the entire island on fire. Everything looked burnt. There was debris everywhere. There was curtains and galvanized wrapped around utility poles, clothing hanging from the power lines. It was it was undescribable. Just sheets of debris everywhere, broken houses just standing like empty shells, and very, very, very heartbreaking. But the days and weeks and months, I should say, that ran after that were very challenging. We didn't have electricity. As a kid, it kind of was, we adapted, I think, much better than the adults did. You know, we played Uno all day, we told stories, we cracked jokes. You know, we weren't in school for a few months, but, you know, we did what we could. I remember doing a lot of reading at the time, but I can't even imagine what it must have been like for my parents. I mean, how are we going to feed these kids? You know, how do we get clean water? You have money, but it's useless because there are no stores. I can't even imagine what they went through, my parents. But we made it. We survived some way, somehow. We did what everyone else did, and we survived. And I know there are a lot of people that had it far worse than we did. Thank God we did have half of our house still standing, and we had bedrooms to sleep in. Some people lost everything. Some people lost their lives. And God spared us. So every time a storm is about to hit, I cringe with anxiety. Please, God, not again. I cannot go through that again. Going through something like that twice, it's like walking through fire after you've already been burnt. It's just, you don't want to do that again. But, and sometimes when my mother trims her hedges or trims her trees really low, it kind of reminds me of Hugo. And that gives me that little weird feeling. And I remember in 2005, watching what happened with Hurricane Katrina, I got that sick feeling in my stomach again. And it's really a horrific night, but the lesson that I took away from it is that no matter how dark your days get or the troubling times that you go through, you will make it. You know, going through it is the hardest part, but there's nothing you can't come out of, is what I'm saying. And yes, to this day, I still jump at sudden noises. Again, I get anxiety every time a storm is about to hit. And believe it or not, to this day, I still sleep with a pillow over my head.